Finally, she's going to die. Those words cut through the darkness like a knife, and Linda Williams realized with absolute horror that she could hear everything, but she couldn't move a single muscle to respond. Her stepsister Brenda's voice dripped with relief and barely contained joy, and the worst part, Linda's own husband Marcus was standing right there beside her hospital bed, agreeing with every cruel word. The doctor said less than 20% chance, Marcus replied, and Linda could actually hear the smile in his voice, which was somehow more terrifying than the words themselves. She's already gone, Brenda. We just have to wait for her body to accept it. Now you might be wondering how Linda got here, trapped in her own body like a prisoner in the world's worst hotel room, listening to the two people she trusted most plan her funeral like they were organizing a birthday party. Well, let me take you back 3 weeks because this story, it's about to get wild. Linda Williams wasn't just any woman in Lagos. At 55 years old, she had built an empire from absolutely nothing. And when I say empire, I mean the woman owned hotels in Abuja, apartment complexes in Victoria Island, and enough businesses to make her one of the wealthiest self-made billionaires in Nigeria. She'd spent 30 years grinding, sacrificing, working 18-hour days while other people were sleeping, and she'd done it all alone. But here's the thing about success that nobody tells you. It's lonely at the top, and Linda was so lonely she could practically hear her own echo in her massive Banana Island mansion. That loneliness, that's what made her vulnerable, and Marcus knew it the moment he walked into her life 4 years ago. Marcus had started as her executive secretary, all charming smiles and perfect manners, and he'd played his role so well that Linda had actually believed he loved her. She'd promoted him to head of all her departments, given him signing authority on her accounts, basically handed him the keys to her entire kingdom, because she thought she'd finally found someone who saw her as more than just a walking bank account. Spoiler alert, she was very, very wrong. 3 weeks before this hospital nightmare, Linda had been driving on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway when her vision suddenly blurred without warning. One moment she was fine, the next moment a truck appeared from nowhere, and the impact that followed should have eliminated her instantly. But somehow, by some miracle or curse, she wasn't sure which, she survived. The doctors at Lagos University Teaching Hospital called it a medical marvel. Her family called it a tragedy. And Marcus and Brenda, they called it an opportunity. Now back to that hospital room, where Linda was discovering that being conscious but paralyzed was actually worse than any nightmare she could have imagined. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even open her eyes, but her hearing, crystal clear, and boy, did she wish it wasn't. When should we start planning the wedding? Brenda asked, her voice light and casual, like she was discussing what to have for lunch rather than her stepsister's funeral and her marriage to Linda's husband. Marcus actually laughed and Linda's trapped mind screamed. Let's wait until she actually dies, Marcus said. A few more days at most, then we grieve publicly for an appropriate time. 6 months, maybe less, then we announce our relationship. 6 months feels so long, Brenda whined, and Linda would have rolled her eyes if she could move them. We've waited years, my love, Marcus replied, and Linda felt him brush against her arm, not with tenderness, but like he was checking to make sure a piece of furniture was still there. What's 6 more months when we'll have everything? Everything, they were talking about everything Linda had built. Her companies, her properties, her life's work. They were planning to take it all, and they thought she couldn't hear them. Here's where it gets even more twisted. Brenda moved closer to the bed, and Linda could smell the expensive perfume she was wearing. The same perfume Linda had bought her for her birthday 3 months ago, which cost more than most people's monthly salary. The irony was not lost on Linda's conscious but paralyzed mind. She was always so desperate to please everyone, Brenda said, and Linda could practically see her stepsister's face twisting with contempt. Always working, always sacrificing, always trying so hard to be loved. How pathetic. Now, if Linda could have moved, she would have sat up and given Brenda the slap of a lifetime, but since she couldn't, she just had to lie there and take it. And trust me, it got worse. Marcus leaned in closer, and his next words made Linda's silent heart break into a million pieces. Remember when she gave me that job? He said, his voice dripping with amusement. She actually believed I loved her. She made me head of all her departments because she thought I was devoted to her. She handed me the keys to her entire empire because I held her hand when she was scared. They both laughed, and the sound was so cruel, so intimate, so shared between two people who had been playing Linda for years. But then Marcus said something that made Linda's despair transform into something else entirely. The transfers are already in progress, he said, dropping his voice lower but still loud enough for Linda's sharp ears. By the time she's officially declared dead, half the liquid assets will be in our offshore accounts. No one will question anything. I'm her husband. I have signing authority on everything." A nurse walked in right then, and faster than you could say, Oscar-winning performance. Marcus and Brenda transformed their voices into masks of concern, so convincing that Linda would have applauded if she could move her hands. "How is she doing?" Marcus asked, his tone heavy with manufactured grief that deserved an award. "No change, Mr. Williams," the nurse replied. "The doctors will update you during rounds tomorrow morning." "Thank you for taking such good care of her," Marcus said with fake sincerity. "This has been so difficult for us." The nurse actually said, "Your wife is lucky to have such a devoted husband." And Linda's trapped mind wanted to scream, "If only you knew." Fam, if you're feeling this story, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This storytelling family is where you need to be, trust me. After the nurse left, Marcus leaned close to Linda's ear. So close she could feel his breath on her skin, and he whispered the words that would change everything. "Goodbye, Victoria," he said. "Thank you for everything you gave me. Your money, your power, your trust. I'll enjoy spending it all, every last naira, while you rot in the ground." The door closed. Silence returned, and only the beeping of machines and Linda's trapped screams echoing inside her skull. They thought she was dying, they thought she couldn't hear them, they thought they had won. But deep in the darkness of her paralyzed body, Linda felt something move. Just her finger, just once, just barely. But it was movement, and in that moment, Linda made herself a promise. She wasn't going to die on their schedule. Days crawled by in that hospital room, and Linda counted each one by the rhythm of nurses changing shifts, by the light that filtered through her closed eyelids, and by the visits from her betrayers who seemed to think her room was their personal planning headquarters. Marcus came every single day, sometimes alone, sometimes with Brenda, and the pattern was always the same. He'd perform for the medical staff like he was auditioning for a Nollywood drama, then speak freely the moment they thought they were alone. And with each visit, Linda learned things that broke her heart and simultaneously rebuilt it into something harder, something sharper, something absolutely unbreakable. On day 5, Marcus brought Brenda in around evening time, and they settled into the chairs beside Linda's bed like they were sitting down for afternoon tea, instead of plotting beside a woman they believed was dying. Linda had learned to recognize their footsteps by now, could identify Marcus's expensive Italian shoes clicking against the floor and Brenda's designer heels that Linda herself had paid for, which added an extra layer of insult to the whole situation. "We've been together for 4 years, Marcus told Brenda, and Linda's consciousness reeled because 4 years meant their entire relationship had been built on lies from the very beginning. 4 years of hiding, 4 years of sneaking around, 4 years of watching her trust me more and more. Brenda laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made Linda wish she could move just so she could throw something at her stepsister's perfectly made-up face. "I remember the day you told me about her," Brenda replied. "You were just her secretary then, and you said she was lonely, sick, desperate for connection." "She was the perfect target," Marcus said, and Linda felt something twist inside her chest because that's what she'd been to him. A target, not a person, not a partner, just a walking bank account with emotions he could manipulate. A billionaire with no family except a stepsister who hated her, no close friends, no one who would question a charming man who seemed to genuinely care. Now here's the thing that really got Linda. Marcus's voice carried amusement, actual amusement, like he was proud of himself for fooling a woman who'd spent 3 decades building businesses and making smart decisions. The audacity was almost impressive in its completeness. "And you played your role perfectly," Brenda said with admiration that made Linda's trapped mind want to scream. "I had excellent motivation," Marcus replied, and Linda could hear him shifting in his chair, probably leaning back with that self-satisfied expression he wore when he thought he'd accomplished something clever. "Every time I held her hand, I thought about the money. Every time I told her I loved her, I calculated the assets. Every time I kissed her, I imagined our future together." Linda's mind went to all those moments she treasured. The night Marcus proposed on the rooftop of her Abuja hotel. The weekend they'd spent in Calabar where he'd held her close and whispered promises about forever. The quiet evenings when he'd massaged her feet after long days at the office. Every single memory was now revealed as a performance, and the weight of that realization would have crushed her if she wasn't already lying down. "She never suspected?" Brenda asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, like she was trying to understand how Linda could have been so blind. Marcus laughed again, and if Linda could have moved, she would have made sure he never laughed again. "Never," he said confidently. She wanted to believe so badly because she'd spent her whole life building her empire, working 18-hour days, sacrificing everything for success, but she never found love. She was terrified of dying alone. So you gave her what she wanted, Brenda said. I gave her the illusion of what she wanted, Marcus corrected. Just enough attention to keep her trusting me, just enough affection to keep her blind, and when her health started failing, I positioned myself perfectly. Head of all departments, signing authority, access to everything. Linda remembered making that decision with crystal clarity now. She'd been in her office overlooking the Lagos harbour, and Marcus had just finished presenting a quarterly report that impressed her. She'd thought about her mortality, about what would happen to her companies when she was gone, and she'd decided to give Marcus complete control because she believed he loved her, because she believed he would protect her legacy. The memory made her want to cry, but tears wouldn't come because even her tear ducts were paralyzed. The doctor says she could go any day now, Brenda commented casually, like she was discussing the weather forecast instead of Linda's life. Her brain activity is minimal, and they're just keeping her body alive at this point. A formality, Marcus agreed, and Linda heard him stand up and walk toward what she assumed was the window because his voice became slightly distant. She's already gone. Her mind is finished. She can't hear anything, can't understand anything. She's just an empty shell waiting to be buried. If Linda could have laughed bitterly, she would have, because Marcus was so confident in his assessment and so completely wrong. But she stayed silent and still, absorbing every word, filing every confession away in her mind like evidence in a case she was building. I moved another 200 million today, Marcus said casually, and Linda's consciousness jolted because 200 million naira was not pocket change. It was real money, serious money, the kind of money that took her months to earn even with all her businesses. The shell company in Mauritius received half, and the rest went to our account in Switzerland. How much have we taken so far? Brenda asked, and she sounded excited, like a child counting birthday presents. Almost 3 billion, Marcus replied, and Linda felt rage building in her paralyzed body like pressure in a volcano that couldn't erupt. And that's just the beginning. Once she's officially declared deceased and I inherit everything, we'll have access to over 20 billion in assets, properties, companies, investments, all of it. 20 billion naira. Linda's entire life's work, 3 decades of sacrifice and determination, reduced to a number these two thieves were planning to steal. She'd started with nothing, absolutely nothing, just a small shop in Serula that she'd built into an empire through sheer will and endless work, and these two thought they could just take it all. What about the employees? Brenda asked. Some of them have been asking questions. I've replaced the ones who were too loyal to her, Marcus said with the kind of cold efficiency that made Linda realize she'd never really known this man at all. Brought in people who are loyal to money, not to some outdated sense of workplace integrity. No one will stand in our way. And after we have everything, Brenda pressed. Marcus's footsteps approached the bed again, and Linda felt his shadow fall over her face. We disappear, he said simply. Dubai, London, somewhere no one knows us. We start fresh with more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes, and Linda Williams becomes nothing but a memory, a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. He leaned down then, and his breath was warm against Linda's face in a way that made her skin crawl. Can you hear me in there? He asked mockingly. Probably not, but just in case, I want you to know something. Your stepsister is incredible in bed, much better than you ever were. All those nights I told you I was working late. I was with her in hotels, in her apartment in Lekki, sometimes in your own guest house while you slept upstairs in the main house. Brenda giggled like this was all some funny joke instead of a complete betrayal of everything decent. Marcus, stop, she said half-heartedly. She can't hear you. I know, Marcus replied, straightening up. But it feels good to say it, to finally tell her the truth after years of pretending to care about her feelings. They left shortly after that, and the door clicked shut behind them with a sound that felt like finality. Linda lay there in the darkness, processing everything she'd heard, and something fundamental shifted inside her consciousness. The despair that had been threatening to drown her since she first woke up in this paralyzed state began transforming, hardening, crystallizing into something else entirely. Pure, focused, patient rage. It burned through her like fire, giving her purpose, giving her strength, giving her a reason to fight her way out of this darkness. They thought she was dying, thought she was helpless, thought they had won. But deep in her paralyzed body, Linda felt her finger twitch again, stronger this time, more deliberate. Her toe moved slightly, and then her eyelid fluttered just once. Progress, small, incremental, barely noticeable progress, but it was there. Linda wasn't dead yet, and she had absolutely no intention of dying on their schedule. In fact, she was going to do something these two traitors never expected. She was going to survive, and when she did, she was going to make absolutely certain they regretted ever underestimating Linda Williams. On the 18th day of what Linda was now calling her involuntary vacation from consciousness, something remarkable happened. Her eyes opened, and for the first time since the accident, she actually saw the fluorescent lights above her hospital bed before darkness claimed her again. But those 3 seconds of vision were proof that her body was fighting back, and fighting back hard. The doctors hadn't noticed that brief moment of consciousness, which was probably for the best because Linda had a feeling that if Marcus found out she was waking up, he'd find a way to make sure she didn't wake up completely. Call it paranoia if you want, but when you've spent 18 days listening to your husband plan your funeral and his wedding to your stepsister, paranoia starts looking a lot like common sense. By day 20, Linda managed to move her hand during a routine check, and a young nurse named Kioma noticed immediately. The poor girl looked like she'd seen a ghost, which technically she kind of had, and she rushed out calling for doctors with the kind of urgency usually reserved for Nollywood medical dramas. Tests were run, machines beeped with new enthusiasm, and whispered consultations took place right outside Linda's door where she could hear every word. Brain activity is increasing significantly, one doctor said, and Linda could hear the confusion in his voice because clearly her recovery was not following the script they'd written. This is completely unexpected given her initial prognosis. We should inform the family immediately. No, Linda thought desperately. Not yet, please, not yet. She willed herself to stay still, to show nothing more, to give them absolutely no reason to alert Marcus that his perfect plan was falling apart. She kept her eyes closed, regulated her breathing, and basically played dead better than she'd ever played anything in her life, which was saying something because Linda had attended enough boring business meetings to know how to fake interest. On day 23, Linda opened her eyes fully for the first time, and the room came into focus slowly like someone was adjusting a camera lens. White walls, medical equipment beeping away, a window showing the grey Lagos sky that looked exactly like her mood. She was alone, completely alone, and that was the best news she'd had in weeks. Her throat burned like she'd swallowed sandpaper, her body felt like it had been taken apart and reassembled by someone who'd lost the instruction manual. But she was awake, properly awake, and that meant she could fight back. The question was how. Dr. Adebayo entered during his afternoon rounds, looking at his clipboard and probably expecting to see the same unconscious patient he'd been monitoring for weeks. Instead, he looked up, saw Linda's open eyes staring directly at him, and dropped the clipboard entirely. The clatter of metal hitting tile echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Mrs. Williams," he stammered, and Linda had never seen a doctor look so shocked, which was almost funny considering doctors were supposed to be unflappable. "You're awake." Linda tried to speak, but her voice came out as a cracked whisper that sounded like a rusty gate opening. "Water." Dr. Adebayo practically flew across the room to pour a glass, and he helped her sip through a straw with hands that were shaking slightly. The liquid felt like pure salvation flowing down her throat, and Linda had never appreciated water more in her entire life. "This is absolutely remarkable," Dr. Adebayo said, checking her vitals with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for winning lottery tickets. "We'd given you less than 20% chance of survival, Mrs. Williams. Your husband has been here every single day, sitting beside your bed. He's going to be so relieved when he hears you're awake." "No," Linda said, and the word came out stronger than she expected, sharp and clear. Dr. Adebayo frowned, his hand pausing on the blood pressure cuff. "No." "Don't tell him," Linda said, grabbing his wrist with a grip that was weak but absolutely determined. "Don't tell anyone I'm awake." "But Mrs. Williams, your family has been so worried about you," Dr. Adebayo protested, though something in his expression suggested he was listening more carefully than his words indicated. "Your husband, your sister, they've been devastated by your condition." Linda looked directly into his eyes and said the words she never thought she'd have to say. "They want me dead, doctor. They've been celebrating my condition like it's Christmas morning." The colour drained from Dr. Adebayo's face faster than water down a Lagos drain during rainy season. "I don't understand." "I heard them," Linda explained, and even though talking exhausted her, she pushed through because this was too important. "Every single day while I was in the coma, I heard everything they said. They're stealing from me, they're planning their life together, they're celebrating that I'm dying. If they know I'm awake, they'll find a way to finish what the accident started." Dr. Adebayo stared at her for a long moment, and Linda watched emotions cycle across his face like slides in a presentation. Disbelief, concern, recognition, and finally, belief. "I've seen it before," he said quietly, sitting down in the chair beside her bed. "Families waiting for inheritance, spouses hopping for insurance money, relatives who suddenly become very attentive when death seems imminent. I didn't want to believe it about your husband, though. He seemed so genuinely devoted when he visited. "He's devoted to my money, not to me," Linda said flatly. "The devotion ends where my bank account begins." Dr. Adebio nodded slowly, and Linda could see him making a decision. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the staff I'm still in the coma," Linda said, her mind already working through the logistics despite her physical exhaustion. "No visitors allowed in the room anymore because of medical complications. And doctor, I need you to bring me a phone, a private one that's not connected to the hospital system. There are people I need to contact, and I need to do it without anyone knowing I'm conscious." "This is highly irregular," Dr. Adebio said, but Linda could see the beginning of a smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "Doctor," Linda said, meeting his eyes with the same intensity she'd used in countless boardroom negotiations. "I'm a billionaire who owns multiple hospitals across Nigeria, including substantial shares in this one. I built my empire from absolutely nothing, starting with a small shop in Surula and turning it into a business dynasty. I'm not going to let two thieves steal everything while I lie here helpless. Help me, and I'll make sure your department never has to worry about funding again. We'll have the best equipment, the best resources, everything you need to save more lives." Dr. Adebio considered this for a moment, and Linda could practically see him weighing the irregularity of her request against the opportunity she was offering. Then he smiled properly this time. "I always thought there was something off about your husband," he admitted. "The way he smiled too easily, the way he touched you like you were an object instead of a person, the way he never seemed truly sad. I told myself I was being judgmental, but my instincts were right." "Your instincts were very right," Linda confirmed. "So will you help me?" "I'll do what you're asking," Dr. Adebio agreed, standing up with new purpose. "But Mrs. Williams, you need to understand something. You're in no condition to fight anyone right now. Your body has been through massive trauma. You need rest, proper nutrition, physical therapy. You're going to need weeks of recovery before you can even think about confronting these people. Then help me get in condition," Linda said with determination that surprised even her. "Physical therapy, nutrition, whatever it takes. I need to be ready when I face them, and I need to be ready soon because every day I wait, they're stealing more of what I built." "When exactly are you planning this confrontation?" Dr. Adebio asked. Linda thought about Marcus's voice, about Brenda's laughter, about the billions of naira they were transferring while she lay supposedly unconscious. She thought about 30 years of work, of sacrifice, of building something meaningful. She thought about the empire these two traitors were dismantling piece by piece. "Soon," she said, and her voice carried a hardness that hadn't been there before the accident. "Very soon. There's a board meeting coming up and I intend to be there." Dr. Adebio looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Linda's expression stopped him. Instead, he just nodded. "I'll arrange for private physical therapy sessions," he said, "and I'll bring you that phone, but Linda," he used her first name for the first time, "be careful. If these people are as dangerous as you say, you need to protect yourself." "They're not dangerous," Linda corrected him with a bitter smile. "They're greedy, and greed makes people sloppy. They think I'm unconscious, so they're not being careful. They're leaving trails, making mistakes, celebrating too early, and that's going to be their downfall." Over the next 2 weeks, Linda worked in complete secrecy. During the day, she submitted to brutal physical therapy sessions, held behind locked doors, where she relearned how to make her muscles function properly. Every movement felt like her body was being torn apart and put back together. Every exercise left her gasping and sweating. But she pushed through, because the pain of recovery was nothing compared to the rage that fueled her. At night, when the hospital quieted down and the staff changed to the skeleton night crew, Linda made phone calls. The first call went to Margaret Okonkwo, her lawyer and oldest friend who'd been there since the Surula days, when Linda was still figuring out how to run a business. Margaret arrived at the hospital disguised as a cleaning woman, complete with a headscarf and cleaning supplies, and the shock on her face when she saw Linda sitting up in bed almost made Linda laugh, which hurt her ribs but felt worth it. "Linda," Margaret whispered urgently, rushing forward and embracing her carefully like she was holding something precious and breakable. "The reports said you were dying. Marcus has been telling everyone you'll never wake up." "The reports were very wrong," Linda said. "But Marcus believes them, and I need him to keep believing them for just a little while longer." She told Margaret everything, and it took nearly an hour because there was so much to tell. Every conversation she'd overheard, every confession, every detail of the 4-year affair and the systematic theft. Margaret's face hardened with each revelation, her jaw clenching tighter and tighter, until Linda thought her friend might actually break a tooth. "I never trusted that man," Margaret said when Linda finally finished. "Something about his eyes, the way they were always calculating, always measuring. Too smooth, too perfect, too eager to please. I was blind," Linda admitted, and saying it out loud hurt more than any physical therapy. I wanted to be loved so desperately that I handed my empire to a snake and called it trust. So what do you want to do now? Margaret asked, and Linda could see the lawyer in her friend already planning strategies. I want to destroy them completely, Linda said simply. But I need evidence, documented proof of every single crime they've committed. I need this to be airtight because I'm not just going to confront them. I'm going to make sure they go to prison for so long they'll forget what freedom feels like. Margaret nodded, pulling out her phone and starting to take notes. I'll start investigating immediately. Bank records, property transfers, communication logs, forged documents. If they've left any trail at all, I'll find it. They've left a trail, Linda assured her with grim satisfaction. They think I'm dying, so they're not being careful. They're probably documenting everything because they think no one will ever question them. And Linda was right. Over the following days, Margaret brought reports that made Linda's blood boil and her resolve strengthen in equal measure. 3.8 billion naira transferred to offshore accounts in Mauritius and Switzerland. 6 major properties sold without proper authorization, including Linda's beloved hotel in Abuja that she'd built from the ground up. Contracts with phantom vendors that were clearly just ways to drain company funds. Forged documents bearing Linda's signature, and the forgeries weren't even good. They'd gotten sloppy because they thought no one would ever check. The final piece of evidence was perhaps the most damning. An updated will naming Marcus as the primary beneficiary of everything, supposedly signed after Linda's accident, when she was obviously unconscious and incapable of signing anything. The audacity of it would have been impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. They've been thorough in their theft, Margaret said grimly during one of their late-night meetings. But incredibly sloppy in their execution. They assumed no one would ever investigate because you'd be dead. Every single transaction is traceable, every signature is provably forged, every transfer leaves a digital footprint. It's like they wanted to get caught. What about witnesses? Linda asked, because she wanted this case to be absolutely unbreakable. Several employees noticed irregularities, but were too afraid to speak up because Marcus fired anyone who asked questions, Margaret explained. Others were replaced with people who are loyal only to money. But I've found a few brave ones who are willing to testify, and their testimony is damning. And my company, Linda asked, dreading the answer. My actual businesses. Margaret hesitated, and that hesitation told Linda everything she needed to know before her friend even spoke. The companies are struggling badly. Cash flow problems from all the theft. Suppliers aren't getting paid. Employees are uncertain about the future. If this continues another month, some divisions might collapse entirely. Linda absorbed this information, feeling her 30 years of work teetering on the edge of destruction because of two people's greed. But instead of despair, she felt clarity, purpose, determination. We need to move faster, Linda said decisively. When's the next board meeting? Next week, Wednesday at 10 in the morning. Perfect, Linda said, and she smiled for the first time since waking up. That's when I make my return. That's when Marcus and Brenda discover that the woman they buried is standing right in front of them. Margaret looked concerned. Linda, you can barely walk without assistance. You need more time to recover physically. I don't have more time, Linda said firmly. Every day I wait, they steal more. Every day I hide, they destroy more. I will not let them take everything I built. I can't. Margaret studied her friend's face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there convinced her. What exactly do you have in mind? Linda leaned forward, ignoring the protest from her still healing body, and her eyes gleamed with the same intensity that had built an empire from nothing. Marcus thinks he's walking into a routine board meeting. Instead, he's walking into an ambush. I want police standing by outside the building. I want prosecutors ready with arrest warrants. I want every single piece of evidence prepared and ready to present. And Margaret. I want to see his face when he realizes that the woman he buried alive is standing right in front of him, very much awake, and absolutely ready to send him to prison. Margaret smiled slowly, the kind of smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Now that, she said, sounds like the Linda Williams I know. Let's destroy them. The morning of the board meeting arrived with all the drama of a Nollywood premiere, and Linda stood in front of a hospital mirror for the first time since the accident, taking in the woman who stared back at her. She barely recognized herself, and honestly, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The woman in the reflection was thinner than before, almost gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes that told stories of pain and sleepless nights. Her hair had been cropped short where they'd shaved it for surgery, and a scar ran along her temple where metal had torn through skin during the accident. She looked like she'd been through war, which made sense because that's exactly what was about to happen. But her eyes were the same, hard, determined, absolutely alive with purpose. They were the eyes of a woman who'd built an empire from nothing, and they were the eyes of a woman who was about to take back everything that had been stolen from her. Linda dressed carefully in a charcoal grey suit that Margaret had brought her, tailored to fit her diminished frame. She chose low heels because her balance was still unreliable, and the last thing she needed was to face down her betrayers while wobbling like a newborn giraffe. Minimal makeup because her hands still shook slightly when she tried to do anything detailed, but that was fine. She didn't need to look perfect, she just needed to look powerful. The woman staring back at her from the mirror didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a survivor, and there was a significant difference between those two things. Margaret met her at a private hospital entrance, helping Linda into a car that would take them to the Williams Holdings headquarters in Victoria Island. The drive felt surreal, because Linda had made this journey thousands of times over the years, but never like this, never returning from what everyone believed was her deathbed to confront the people who'd wished her there. "Everyone is assembled," Margaret reported as they navigated Lagos traffic, which was its usual chaotic self, because apparently even Linda's dramatic resurrection couldn't stop Lagos from being Lagos. Marcus arrived 15 minutes ago with Brenda. She's sitting in the guest section like she owns the place. "She thinks she's about to own the place," Linda said, and her voice was calm despite the rage burning in her chest. "She's been attending all the major meetings since my accident, positioning herself, establishing presence, preparing for when she becomes the wife of the company owner." "That's not going to happen," Margaret said firmly. "No," Linda agreed, "it's definitely not." They pulled up to the Williams Holdings building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that Linda had commissioned 10 years ago, when the company had reached a new level of success. She'd been so proud of this building, had seen it as a symbol of everything she'd achieved, and now two thieves were sitting inside it thinking they owned the place. Not for much longer. Margaret escorted Linda through service corridors to avoid being seen, and they made their way up to the executive floor where the boardroom waited. Through the frosted glass doors, Linda could see silhouettes seated around the long mahogany table, could hear the murmur of conversation, could feel the presence of the two people who'd destroyed her trust completely. "The police are positioned in the building," Margaret whispered. "Ground floor out of sight, they'll enter on your signal. And the prosecutors, ready with arrest warrants. Everything is prepared, Linda. All you have to do is walk through that door." Linda took a deep breath, and for just a moment she let herself remember everything that had led to this point. The loneliness that had made her vulnerable, the illness that had made her desperate, the love she'd thought she found, the betrayal she'd discovered while trapped in her own body. She remembered lying paralyzed in that hospital bed, listening to Marcus and Brenda celebrate her death, and she remembered the moment when despair had transformed into rage. They'd thought she was dying, they'd thought she couldn't hear them, they'd thought they'd won. They were about to discover just how wrong they'd been. Linda pushed open the conference room door, and the effect was instantaneous and absolutely glorious. The room fell silent so completely that you could have heard a pin drop in Lecky from here. Every head turned toward the entrance in perfect synchronization, like they'd rehearsed it. Every face registered shock in varying degrees, confusion, disbelief, absolute horror, and Linda savored every single second of their reactions. But she was watching only two faces, and those faces made the entire painful recovery worth it. Marcus sat at the head of the table in her seat, wearing one of the expensive suits she'd bought him back when she'd thought he loved her. His expression cycled through emotions so fast it was almost comical. Surprise, recognition, horror, and then desperate calculation as his mind tried to figure out how to spin this situation in his favor. Linda could practically see the lies forming behind his eyes. Brenda sat beside him looking like she'd seen a ghost, which technically she kind of had. Her face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and no sound came out at all. It was the most satisfying silence Linda had ever heard. Linda walked forward slowly, and her heels clicked against the marble floor with each deliberate step. The sound echoed in the silent room like a countdown timer, and she made sure every step was steady, every step was strong, every step was a statement that said she was here, she was alive, and she was absolutely done playing dead. "Linda," Marcus said, rising to his feet so quickly he almost knocked over his chair, and Linda had to give him credit, the man recovered fast. "You're awake, this is wonderful, this is a miracle." His voice found its familiar smoothness, that charming tone he'd used to manipulate her for 4 years, and Linda felt nothing. No pain, no longing, no trace of the love she'd once felt. Just cold, hard determination. "We've been so worried," Marcus continued, moving toward her with his arms outstretched like he was going to embrace her. "The doctors said you might never wake up. I've been at your bedside every day. Ask anyone here, I never gave up hope that you'd come back to us. Linda held up one hand, stopping him in his tracks, and she said nothing. She just let the silence stretch, let his discomfort grow, let him wonder exactly how much she knew. Brenda found her voice finally, though it came out shaky and uncertain. Linda, this is incredible. We thought we'd lost you forever. We were preparing ourselves for the worst possible outcome. I know exactly what you were preparing for, Linda said, and her voice came out calm, controlled, absolutely cold. Marcus's smile flickered like a candle in wind. What do you mean? I mean the wedding you were planning, Linda said conversationally. In Dubai, wasn't it? Oceanfront venue, private ceremony, absolutely beautiful. Very expensive too, but I suppose that wasn't a concern since you were planning to use my money to pay for it. The colour drained from Marcus's face faster than water from a broken pipe, and Linda watched it happen with deep satisfaction. I mean the 4 billion naira you've stolen from my companies, she continued, walking closer to the table. The properties you've sold without authorization, the accounts you've drained, the documents you've forged with my signature. Should I continue, or are you starting to understand the situation you're in? Brenda's hand went to her throat in a gesture that would have been dramatic in a movie, but just looked pathetic in real life. Linda, I don't know what you're talking about. I think maybe the accident affected your memory. My memory is crystal clear, Linda said, turning to face Brenda directly. I remember every single conversation you had beside my hospital bed, every laugh, every plan, every cruel word you spoke while thinking I was unconscious and couldn't hear you. That's impossible, Marcus whispered, and the terror in his voice was genuine now, raw and undisguised. You were in a coma. The doctors confirmed your brain activity was minimal. You couldn't have heard anything. You couldn't have understood anything. And yet I heard everything, Linda said, moving closer to him with each word. I heard you tell Brenda that you never loved me, not for a single moment. I heard you describe how you manipulated me, how you saw me as a target, how every kiss and every kind word was calculated to give you access to my money. Do you remember saying those things, Marcus? The executives around the table sat frozen like statues, watching the confrontation unfold with expressions that ranged from shock to dawning understanding. Several of them were people Marcus had brought in to replace Linda's loyal employees, and she watched recognition and fear cross their faces as they realized their positions were about to become very uncertain. I heard you describe your affair, Linda continued, her voice never rising but carrying absolute authority. 4 years, you said, sneaking around behind my back, laughing at how easily you fooled me. Hotels across Lagos, Brenda's apartment in Lekki, my own guest house while I slept upstairs. You were very detailed in your confessions. She turned to Brenda, who was shrinking back in her chair like she wanted to disappear into the upholstery. And you, sister dear, I heard you say you were jealous of me, that I had everything that should have been yours, that our father loved my mother more than yours. I heard you call me pathetic, desperate, too eager to please. I heard every word. Linda, please, Brenda started, but Linda cut her off with a look. Explain to me what I misunderstood, Linda said coldly. Explain why my husband and my stepsister were planning their wedding before my body was even cold. Explain why billions of naira have vanished from accounts I control. Explain why properties I own have been sold without my knowledge. Explain why there's a forged will naming Marcus as my sole beneficiary, supposedly signed while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. She pulled out her phone and nodded to Margaret, who moved to the conference room doors and opened them wide. Police officers entered the room in formation, followed by prosecutors carrying folders full of evidence, and the effect on Marcus and Brenda was immediate and beautiful. Marcus Williams and Brenda Okafor, Linda announced formally. Meet the people who will be escorting you to prison, where I sincerely hope you enjoy the accommodations, because you're going to be there for a very long time. Marcus lunged toward her then, and Linda saw desperation override whatever judgment he had left. You can't do this, he shouted, his smooth facade crumbling completely. I'm your husband. Everything I did was as your legal representative. You gave me authority. You signed documents. You can't prove anything. 2 officers grabbed him, forcing his arms behind his back, and Marcus struggled against them uselessly. His expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect hair fell across his forehead, and he looked nothing like the charming man who'd convinced Linda to trust him. He just looked pathetic. Actually, I can prove everything, Margaret said, stepping forward and activating the large presentation screen at the head of the boardroom. Bank transfers traced to offshore accounts in your names. Property sales authorized with forged signatures, very poor forgeries I might add. Communication records between you and Ms. Okafor spanning 4 years. Witness testimony from employees who observed your criminal activities. Security footage of you accessing files you weren't authorized to access. The evidence is overwhelming. Documents flashed across the screen in rapid succession. Dates, amounts, account numbers, signatures, messages, everything Margaret had gathered over the past 2 weeks. Each piece of evidence was damning, and together they painted a picture of systematic, calculated theft. You thought you were clever, Linda said, watching Marcus's face as he saw his crimes displayed for everyone to see. You thought no one would question the grieving husband managing his dying wife's affairs during a crisis. But you got greedy, you got sloppy, and you forgot the most important thing. She leaned close to Marcus, close enough to see the genuine fear in his eyes, close enough to smell the expensive cologne she'd bought him. You forgot that I built this empire from nothing. I know every account, every property, every contract, every single naira that comes in and goes out. Did you really think you could steal from me without leaving a trail? Marcus's face contorted with rage and desperation, and what came out of his mouth next shocked even Linda. You were supposed to die, he spat, and his voice was ugly now, stripped of all pretense. The accident was supposed to eliminate you. How are you even standing here? You should be dead, you should be buried, this isn't fair. The room fell silent again, and Linda smiled. Not a pleasant smile, not a happy smile, but a smile of absolute victory. Because I'm stronger than you ever imagined possible, she said quietly. Because I didn't survive 30 years of building a business empire just to be destroyed by a scheming secretary and a jealous stepsister. Because the woman you tried to bury refused to stay in the grave. She stepped back and addressed the entire room, her voice carrying authority that came from 3 decades of commanding respect. Officers, please remove these 2 from my building. I have a company to save, and I can't do that while looking at their faces. The police moved forward with handcuffs, and Brenda finally broke down completely, sobbing and pleading. Linda, please, I'm your sister. We're family, you can't do this to family. Linda looked at her stepsister with eyes that held no sympathy, no mercy, no trace of the familial bond Brenda was desperately invoking. You stopped being my family the moment you celebrated my death, she said flatly. You're just a criminal now, and criminals go to prison. As the officers led Marcus and Brenda toward the door, Marcus turned back one final time, his face twisted with hatred. This isn't over, he called out. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll get out someday, and when I do. When you do, Linda interrupted calmly, I'll still be standing, I'll still be successful, I'll still be everything I built myself to be. And you'll still be the man who threw away everything for greed and lost it all. You'll still be nothing. The doors closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the boardroom, and silence fell once more. The remaining executives stared at Linda with expressions of shock, respect, and more than a little fear. Linda walked to the head of the table, to her seat that Marcus had been occupying, and she sat down slowly. Her body protested every movement, reminding her that she was still recovering, but she ignored the pain because this moment was too important. Now then, she said, looking around at the faces of people who'd thought she was dead. Let's talk about the future of this company and exactly what changes we're going to make. The trial became the biggest news story in Nigeria for months, and Linda watched it dominate every headline, every news cycle, every conversation in Lagos and beyond. Billionaire's husband and sister arrested for massive fraud. Coma survivor, EXPOSES billionaire theft scheme. Linda Williams rises from deathbed to confront betrayers. Reporters camped outside her office building like they were waiting for concert tickets. Interview requests flooded her inbox until Margaret had to create a separate email just to handle them. And the public ate up every detail of the story. People loved the tale of the woman who'd heard her own funeral being planned and returned to exact justice. And honestly, Linda couldn't blame them, because even she had to admit it was pretty dramatic. But she gave only one interview during those chaotic months, just one, because she wasn't interested in becoming a media sensation. She was interested in seeing Marcus and Brenda pay for what they'd done. The journalist was a young woman named Amara, who asked the question everyone wanted answered. How did it feel to hear your husband and sister celebrating your death while you lay helpless in that hospital bed? Linda considered the question carefully, taking her time before responding because this was important. It felt like dying twice, she said honestly. Once from the accident when the truck hit me and my body shut down. Once from the betrayal when I realized the 2 people I trusted most were mocking everything I was, while I lay there unable to defend myself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I'd built my entire life around work, around achievement, around proving my worth to a world that told me I couldn't succeed. I'd finally allowed myself to trust someone, to love someone, to believe I could have both success and happiness at the same time. What kept you going during those dark days? Amara asked, leaning forward. Rage, Linda said simply, and she saw the journalist's eyes widen at her honesty. Pure, concentrated, absolutely focused rage. Every cruel word Marcus spoke became fuel for my recovery. Every laugh from Brenda became motivation to survive. They thought they were speaking over a corpse, celebrating over someone who would never know what they'd done. They didn't realize they were creating an enemy who would not stop until they faced justice. Do you have any message for other people who have been betrayed by those they trusted? Linda looked directly into the camera, and her voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Survive. Whatever it takes, just survive. The people who hurt you want you to give up, want you to crumble, want you to disappear quietly so they can enjoy what they've taken from you. Don't give them that satisfaction. Rise up, fight back, and make them regret ever underestimating you. The trial itself lasted 6 long months, and Linda attended every single day because she wanted Marcus and Brenda to see her face. Wanted them to remember that the woman they'd tried to bury was very much alive and watching their downfall. Prosecutors presented mountains of evidence that Margaret had meticulously gathered. Bank records showing systematic transfers, property sales authorized with laughably bad forgeries, communication logs between Marcus and Brenda, spanning 4 years, witness testimony from brave employees who'd noticed irregularities. The case was so airtight that even the defense lawyers looked discouraged. But the most entertaining part, and Linda would admit she found it darkly amusing, was watching Marcus and Brenda turn on each other with the speed of hungry hyenas fighting over scraps. She planned everything, Marcus claimed dramatically from the witness stand, pointing at Brenda like she was the villain in a Nollywood movie. She approached me years ago with this scheme. She told me her sister was wealthy and sick and lonely. She convinced me to pursue the relationship, to gain Linda's trust, to position myself for when she died. He's lying, Brenda countered when it was her turn, and her voice shook with righteous indignation that would have been convincing if everyone didn't know she was guilty. He manipulated me. He promised me love and security and a future together. I had no idea the extent of his criminal activities. I was a victim in this too. Their mutual betrayal only made the prosecution's case stronger because the court saw exactly what they were. 2 people willing to sacrifice each other to save themselves, exactly as they'd been willing to sacrifice Linda. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Marcus received 25 years in Kirikiri maximum security prison. Brenda received 18 years. When the judge read the sentences, Marcus's face went pale and Brenda actually fainted, which caused a brief commotion that Linda watched with complete indifference. As officers led Marcus away in handcuffs, he turned toward Linda one final time, and his face was twisted with hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "This isn't over," he called out, his voice echoing in the courtroom. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll get out someday, and when I do..." "When you do," Linda interrupted calmly, "I'll still be standing, I'll still be successful, I'll still be building and creating and thriving. And you'll still be the man who threw away everything for greed, you'll still be nothing." The doors closed behind him with finality, the courtroom emptied slowly, and Linda sat alone in the silence feeling something she hadn't felt in months: peace. Real, genuine, hard-won peace. 3 years passed after the trial, and Linda transformed everything. Williams Holdings not only recovered, but expanded beyond even her original vision. The stolen assets were recaptured through aggressive legal action that Margaret led with the tenacity of a warrior. Damaged business relationships were repaired through honest communication and demonstrated reliability. The company culture was completely overhauled with new safeguards, new protocols, new systems designed to prevent such betrayal from ever happening again. But more importantly, Linda herself had changed in ways she never expected. She no longer worked 18-hour days because she'd learned that working yourself to exhaustion left you vulnerable. She delegated more, trusted carefully but thoroughly, and built relationships based on demonstrated loyalty rather than hopeful assumptions. She dated occasionally, though she approached new relationships with healthy skepticism and the kind of boundaries that came from experience. And she established something that became her true legacy: the Linda Williams Foundation for Survivors. The foundation funded shelters for women escaping abuse, supported legal aid for victims of fraud and financial crimes, and provided scholarships for young people trying to escape difficult circumstances and build better lives. Why survivors specifically? A reporter asked during the foundation's launch event, which was held in a beautiful venue in Abuja that overlooked the city Linda loved. "Because I am one," Linda replied simply, looking out at the audience of people who'd gathered to support her vision. I survived a near-fatal accident that should have eliminated me. I survived betrayal by the people closest to me who wanted me gone. I survived hearing my own death celebrated like it was a victory. And I know there are others out there facing similar situations right now. People who feel powerless, people who feel trapped, people who feel like giving up. She paused, letting her words sink in. I want them to know that survival is possible, that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you, that you can rise from the ashes stronger than before, that the people who tried to bury you can become the foundation you stand on when you rebuild yourself. Applause filled the room, warm and genuine, but Linda was thinking about something else entirely. She was thinking about a hospital bed and machines beeping, about voices she was never meant to hear, about the moment she decided she would not die on their schedule. Fam, before we get to what happens next, if this story is touching your heart, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Subscribe to this channel because this storytelling family is just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's get back to Linda because her story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. 5 years after the trial, Linda received a letter that changed everything she thought she knew. The envelope arrived at her office on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, delivered by regular prison mail service, and Linda almost had her assistant discard it, because she received dozens of letters from inmates asking for money or mercy or second chances. But something about the handwriting made her pause, Marcus's cramped, desperate scrawl that she recognized immediately. She opened it in private, and what she read made her blood run cold. Family, that's where we have to pause this incredible story, but trust me when I say this is far from over. If you need to know what happens next, if you need to see how Linda handles this new threat, then you absolutely have to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell because when the next part drops, you don't want to miss a single second. Drop a comment telling me what you think Brenda is planning. Let's figure this out together. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear about survival and strength. This is just the beginning, fam. Linda's story continues, and it's about to get even more intense. Stay tuned.